Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be bringing you my October wrap-up. I had a bit of a weird reading month in October. I've been mega busy in October and I was also sick for like 2 full weeks. I'm still a little bit ill. I was getting quite stressed out by reading, by having to keep both university reading and books I've been sent for review, and that was kind of getting on top of me a lot, and that just kind of made me shut down. Doing essays and writing a lot has kind of got in the way of reading. I did manage to read, I think it was 8 books, so I'm really pleased with that, considering how slow I was at reading. There are like a couple of poetry collections in there, so they're quite short. I would like to get back towards reading like 10 plus books a month, but I understand that that's not always an option when I'm doing so many other things, and I realise that it's fine to just want to come home and watch Netflix when I've had a really busy day. So I'm going to start by talking about the books that I read for Victober, which was a Victorian literature readathon. If for some reason Victorian literature isn't your thing, I will leave a little time sign for when I get onto the more general fiction and poetry, etc. The first book I read for Victober was The Mill on the Floss by George Eliot, and this was for the challenge to read a book by a female author, and I really enjoyed this book. I'm a big George Eliot fan. This is only the second book I've read by her, but I definitely want to go on and read more of her work. This is about a pair of siblings, Maggie and Tom, though it is predominantly about Maggie. It deals with provincial life in the Victorian period. It deals with education, sibling relationship, deals with marriage, it deals with socioeconomic circumstances, it engages with the emerging scientific theories such as like Darwin's theory of evolution, it deals with gender, it deals with marriage. One of the things that I really enjoy about George Eliot's books is how complex the characters are. Every character says and does things that you agree with and disagree with. There's no straight up like good character and bad character. They are complex, they are flawed, and it's brilliant. On occasion, Tom's a bit of an arse, but on occasions, he also says something that makes total sense and you agree with him. Sometimes Maggie is amazing and fiery and empowering, and sometimes she does things which aren't brilliant decisions. In my experience of George Eliot books, which is this one, The Mill on the Floss and Middlemarch, I can understand how the endings can be a bit marmitey, but I have always been on the side of I love the ending. The ending of this book kind of just comes out of the blue, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a really nice way to end it, to be honest. Not nice, it's not nice by any means, but I did think it made sense. What George Eliot book should I read next? Leave your suggestions down in the comments. This month I also listened to an audiobook of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. This wasn't for any particular challenge, but I was reading it for Victober and for university. I've only ever read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland for pleasure. It's never something I've considered like looking in depth at, and looking at it in a more complex way is fascinating. It was such a comfort read for me. It was an utter joy to just be in my room with a cup of tea and a lit candle and listening to that audiobook. It was so nice that in a month where I was struggling with reading, this book came along that was just a pure joy to reread. I think that's something you need to do when you are struggling with reading and finding the time for it. Pick something up that is just makes you feel nice. It reminds you why you love reading so much, why you love that feeling of curling up in bed with a book. And then if you feel so inclined, taking that book and thinking about it critically and reminding yourself why you enjoy thinking about books critically. For the Victober challenge to read a book in less than a week, I decided to pick up The Water Babies by Charles Kingsley, and can you tell I'm doing an essay on this book? That's probably what I should be doing instead of filming this video. So this is about a young boy named Tom. Lots of Toms in Victorian literature I've noticed, and he is working as a chimney sweep for a man named Grimes. His working conditions are terrible and he ends up in the bedroom of a young girl named Ellie. Tom flees from Ellie's bedroom and ends up falling into a river and drowning. He is then reborn as what is called a water baby. This book basically follows that journey that he goes through. There were a lot of things that I enjoyed about this book. I really enjoyed the narrative style of it. I really enjoyed its engagement with science. It really engages with the scientific debates of the Victorian period. Kingsley, although being a man of the cloth, was very much for people accepting evolutionary theory, but he didn't take it too seriously. The scientific community is kind of slightly taken the mick out of in this book. I really enjoyed how Kingsley criticised the working conditions that children needed to endure in the Victorian period, but so racist. I didn't appreciate the sections where Irish people are referred to as like untrustworthy lying paddies. Jewish people aren't treated particularly favourably, and people of colour are not treated well in this book. There's a lot of comparison between apes and people being less evolved and being subject to degeneration, which is basically the opposite of evolution. If it wasn't so racist, I would have enjoyed it a lot. The final challenge that I managed to complete for Victober was to read a Victorian Gothic novel, and for this I picked up Dracula by Bram Stoker. I don't feel like I need to give that much of a summary of the plot of this one. I feel like it's one of those Victorian books that is just so familiar in our culture now that everyone kind of knows what happens. I found this book fascinating, and I am going to do further reading on it because I just found it so thought-provoking and so intriguing. This really engages with gender and female sexuality and how those things have been repressed in Victorian society. I thought the writing style was fantastic. I thought it was gripping. I did not want to put it down. As I said, I do want to do some further reading around this and develop my thoughts further, but yes, I really, really enjoyed this one, and it was really cool reading it around Halloween. They are all the Victorian books that I read this month. Now on to some of the other books that I read. I'm going to start with the poetry. This month I read Graffiti by Savannah Brown. You probably know Savannah Brown as a really well-known YouTuber. If you somehow don't know her channel, I will link it down below. It's Savannah's poetry collection, and I found it absolutely brilliant. It was one of those poetry collections where after reading it, I did a bunch of writing, and that's how I know I really enjoy a poetry collection. It covers a range of topics that have been relevant in Savannah's life, death, love, eating disorder, and sometimes moles. The poem about moles was probably my favourite, not gonna lie. Poems are accompanied by illustrations by Ed Stockham, and they were really, really cute additions to the collection. If you want a lesson in how spoken word or slam poetry can transfer onto the page, then I really think you should read this book because it is fantastic. I also read The Immigration Handbook by Caroline Smith, and this is published by Seren. I was lucky enough to meet Caroline very recently. The society which I'm vice president of at uni, we arranged for her to come in and do a reading and interview her, and it was fascinating hearing her talking about her poems and explaining them a little bit more and sharing her experiences and hearing her read them for herself. It was absolutely brilliant, and I'm really pleased with how well the event went, and it was so good. So Caroline has worked as a asylum caseworker for a London-based MP, and this collection explores some of the experiences she has encountered in that line of work. They are powerful and convey a really strong message without being particularly shouty or political. That's something that Caroline kind of asserted as well, that this isn't a political collection per se. This is just sharing stories. I really, really enjoyed this. Off the top of my head, two of the poems that I really enjoyed were Teenager and Father. I thought they were really, really strong. Another couple that I highlighted were The Jumper and also Ali. I thought Ali was really great. So yeah, I would highly recommend this one. So moving on to the two non-Victorian pieces of fiction that I read this month. I read Holding Up the Universe by Jennifer Niven. Wasn't a huge fan of this one. So this is about two teenagers, the first of which is Libby Strout. She's dealing with a number of issues, including dealing with grief and the loss of her mother, dealing with her father's grief, dealing with her past and once being dubbed America's fattest teen, moving to a new high school and needing to make friends there. And this book is also about a teenage boy named Jack, who, while is quite popular, deals with a very difficult cognitive disorder where he cannot recognize faces. So even his own mother and his little brother, he cannot recognize them. I really appreciated how Niven attempted to include representation in this book. I thought that was a really important effort for her to go to. However, I found the plot of this book lacked a lot of substance. I don't think it's a particular spoiler to say that these two characters end up in a relationship together. This is a young adult romance, but I didn't understand the chemistry between them. I didn't think there was that much chemistry there. It felt like they had these intense feelings just because the author decided that they would. For me, it just felt a little bit, he's just a boy, she's just a girl, can I make it any more obvious? I did enjoy the process of reading this book, but it's not something that is going to stay in my mind. I guess I just need to accept that I'm maybe not the target audience for YA anymore. The final book that I read in October was Panty, and I will type out the author's and translator's name because I will butcher them if I try to pronounce them. This is published by Tilted Axis Press, who publish exclusively translated fiction. It was started by Deborah Smith, who you may know as the translator of Han Kang's books. It's about a woman who arrives alone in Calcutta and finds herself feeling very unsettled and uneasy. She finds that her identity is already quite shaken up in this new environment, and she comes across a pair of blood-stained leopard print underwear. She begins to fantasize about their former owners, she wears them, and these two identities begin to collide. Identities begin to blur together. This is very literary. It deals with nationhood and religion and gender and sexuality. If those are things that you are interested in, then I would highly recommend this book. While it is a short read, I think you do need to think about it quite a lot when you're reading it, and I think I didn't get as much out of it as I could have because I was reading it in a bit of a reading slumpy period. Nonetheless, I really enjoyed it. I really found the themes it was engaging with fascinating. And of course, if you are interested in translated fiction, Tilted Axis Press is the way to go. So they are all the books that I read in October. I'm currently halfway through You Can't Touch My Hair by Phoebe Robinson and a little under halfway through The Country Girls by Edna O'Brien. I'm already starting to feel back on track with reading now. It feels quite nice. Let me know if you have read any of these books or if there are any of them that you are interested in down in the comments and we can have a chat. I now upload on Mondays and Thursdays as opposed to Sundays and Wednesdays. I've just found over the past few weeks that's how timing has worked out. I'm always a bit more ready to get a video up on a Monday and a Thursday than I am on a Sunday and a Wednesday. So I will see you guys in my next video on Monday.